Why does it seem like everyone is saying that everything's unhealthy nowadays? I can't be the only one that's noticed this, right? You can look up something like, what are the best fats to cook in? And this is what you get.
Avocado and olive oil. So when you heat them up, they're going to become rancid. They're going to become damaged. They're going to become unstable. So don't cook with avocado or olive oil.
Peanut oil. These oils break down super easy under heat. They cause inflammation and they wreak havoc on your gut.
Is coconut oil healthy? Coconut oil consumption does raise LDL cholesterol levels, which is causally associated with atherosclerosis.
Have you ever wondered why frying with butter is not recommended? Butter starts to burn at just 150 degrees Celsius. This can cause your food to burn. Moreover, when heated, the proteins and fats in butter break down and its beneficial properties are lost.
Son of a bitch!
Seriously, it seems like every time I have a solid diet plan going, I hear about what I'm eating is going to kill me in the next 3 days. And that's exactly why I wanted to make this video. It's pretty frustrating diving into the health rabbit hole and emerging even more confused than when you first entered. Ever since I got into health and fitness when I was around 16, I've been in this state of confusion about pretty much everything. And it's only gotten worse over the past few years because now it seems like health has become an increasingly popular topic in the mainstream media. And now there's more people than ever online talking about conflicting information that just doesn't make any sense. And hearing about this just got me thinking, like, is everything just unhealthy? And that's when it hit me. Yes. Yes, everything is unhealthy. Now hear me out. There's a few layers to this discussion that I wanted to go into, and I'll leave this video in 3 chapters in case anyone wants to skip through. But before we get into that, I just wanted to point out real quick that I don't literally mean that every single thing that you could possibly consume is unhealthy. There's obviously a few universally agreed upon facts. In fact, here's some right now. Eating a good ratio of omega-3 to omega-6 fats. Good. Eating roughly 1 gram of protein per pound of lean body mass. Good. Eating processed sugar. Bad. Now, I'm sure you could find someone out there who actually disagrees with this, but these are generally agreed upon by most health experts, and I just didn't want to be given the impression that there's absolutely no consensus in the health literature. But now that we got that out of the way, we can finally ask, why is everything unhealthy? Alright, so the first point I wanted to address here, which is something that I'm sure a lot of us have already noticed, is that a lot of health influencers these days are basically just trying to sell you a product, and they use fear-mongering as a tactic to try and sell you on that product. Usually when you see someone telling you that XYZ is terrible for you, there's a solid chance that the intent of that video is to bait you into trying to buy the product that doesn't contain whatever harmful nutrient or compound that they're talking about. Now, this in itself isn't necessarily a bad thing. There's influencers out there that are genuinely selling good products and have valid information, but then, you also have videos like this.
HealthBoss, did you know that fluoride was a rat poison before it was a toothpaste? Happy to announce that I have OregaFresh toothpaste and mouth rinse. It's an oregano oil infused mouth rinse and toothpaste that is fluoride free.
So I chose this clip because fluoride seems to be a common example nowadays of people villainizing a compound and telling you not to use any products that have it. And in case you didn't know, most toothpaste nowadays have some level of fluoride in their formula. Now, don't get me wrong, it's not like what this guy is saying is totally wrong. Fluoride absolutely can be toxic in the right dosage. But here's the thing. Just look at the type of fluoride being used and the dosages. Normal toothpaste contains about 1.3 milligrams of sodium fluoride or monofluorophosphate in a serving. Rat poisons mostly use sodium fluorosilicate, which is a significantly more toxic compound. Now, some older rat poisons did use sodium fluoride in their bait, but the dosages would be way higher than anything you would get in normal toothpaste. It's difficult to find any sodium fluoride formulations of old rat poisons or pesticides, but everything that I could find is like 90% pure sodium fluoride, when normal toothpaste is 0.25 to 0.35%. Plus, there's studies on rats showing that up to 27 milligrams of fluoride exposure show no signs of toxicity, let alone death. So they'd have to get more exposure than this. And again, the amount present in a serving of toothpaste for a human, which is significantly larger than a rat, is 1.3 milligrams. And that's not even taking into account the amount of fluoride that would actually be ingested from that, which is about 0.1 milligrams. And even that can probably be reduced, depending on how well you rinse your mouth with clean water afterwards, or if you can spit it all out effectively. Now, I'm not saying that fluoride isn't worthy of some concern. I actually think it's a good idea to try and avoid more significant sources of it like in tap water, where the legal threshold for it is up to 4 milligrams per liter. But we really need to realize how small the exposure in something like toothpaste is. It's the dosage that makes something toxic, not the compound itself. You know what else is used as a poison? Cyanide. But that doesn't mean that apples are bad for you, because the level of cyanide in their seeds is way too low. But in this video, this guy doesn't mention anything about dosages and how much we'd actually ingest from toothpaste, just that fluoride is also used in rat poison, because hearing that is more likely to scare you into buying his $40 toothpaste kit. And it's probably not even as effective at keeping your teeth healthy as regular toothpaste. But yeah, Fluoride is just one of the many examples of health influencers overblowing compounds that definitely can be toxic with the right dosage, but in reality, a lot of products or foods that we consume just really don't contain that much of it, and it's just not something that you need to be terrified of, in most contexts at least. However, it's definitely in their best interest to try and make you afraid of these things, so that they can charge these crazy prices on their alternative products. We're living in an age where everyone is trying to find ways to make money online, even if it means misleading people. And that's exactly why I think that so many people are misled into thinking that everything's unhealthy. Because with so many grifters trying to find an excuse to label something as unhealthy, then literally everything ends up sounding unhealthy, and everyone just ends up being confused about it. But this is only the start of this rabbit hole. The next part of it is bias. So you know how vegans think that the world would be a better place with less violence and more compassion, and carnivores think that eating animals is more primal, and animal products are the most nutrient-dense foods, and so that they're the best to eat? Yeah, that's basically the idea I'm referring to here. The point I'm trying to make is that a lot of people have an ideology when it comes to food, and what they end up doing is subconsciously cherry-picking data that supports that notion while ignoring what goes against it. And I strongly believe that this is why we so often see these videos online with information that completely contradicts other videos on the same topic. I'm using vegans and carnivores here just to illustrate two extreme sides of the spectrum, like how a vegan might say that saturated fat and cholesterol is bad for us, and thus we need to avoid meat. Now, even if more and more studies have come out lately that go against this notion, there's still a fair amount of data to support it, especially when you apply it to the average person. However, what a vegan would probably ignore are factors like how plenty of healthy nations consume a decent amount of saturated fat and cholesterol still. Also, that completely ridding a diet of saturated fat and cholesterol implies a diet very high in oxalates, which are shown to be nutrient absorption inhibitors. That's not to say that the other side of the extreme with carnivores is without fault either. Most carnivore YouTubers you'd find would totally dismiss saturated fat and cholesterol and say they have no link to cardiovascular risk, which has some basis, but it's still a pretty contentious topic. But what they might not mention is that carnivore diets seem to slow down the metabolism, exhibited by low T3 levels regarding thyroid function. And a lack of carbohydrates will leave your body with way less power from a lack of hydration in the muscles. Vegans and carnivores aren't the only example of this, of course. You might have noticed how modern politics have led to some more extremist views on health as well, especially if you live in America. Just look at the new Secretary of Health and Human Services, RFK Jr. He's definitely made some crazy health claims, I'm not denying that, but a lot of what he suggests, like removing processed foods and dyes, are actually pretty good ideas. But people who don't align with the Trump administration tend to oppose anything RFK says just because he's aligned with Trump. It's not too hard to believe how someone that's not even invested in health but hates the Trump administration might stumble upon an article like this and automatically be swayed into opposing everything he says rather than actually giving it some thought. And that's exactly the point I'm trying to make. People are biased, and whether we like it or not, most people have views and affiliations that make us lean towards information that supports them rather than challenge them. And that compounds into enforcing these incredibly strong views that people post online about how one side is super dangerous and their side is the best one that you should follow. And thus, this creates the same problem that I mentioned in the first point of this video, where there's just a ton of people online with different backgrounds talking about how all these different things are unhealthy. Now, am I saying that the answer to health is to be somewhere in the middle of the extremes with a balanced diet? Yeah, kinda, but it's not that simple. And that's because I think that even if you do manage to eliminate personal bias and look at the full picture of health literature and philosophy, this creates another problem, which is my last point of the video and why I say that everything is unhealthy. So basically, when I say that everything is unhealthy, I mean that for just about every food on this planet, if you dig deep enough, you will find something that could be considered bad about it. And really, I mean everything. Like, let's think about some foods that most people would associate with being healthy. Broccoli?
Why broccoli is bad for you, sadly. Broccoli impacts the functioning of your thyroid gland because it is goitrogen in nature.
Chicken?
Do you want to know why chicken can be ruining your fat loss? First, even organic chickens are fed grains that are high in polyunsaturated fatty acids, and since they're monogastric animals, they cannot convert these polyunsaturated fatty acids into saturated fats. Now, poofs are bad because they overburden your liver, they increase estrogen, and they decrease thyroid, which can obviously lead to weight gain.
Bro, even water.
Water. What kind of water should you drink? How much should you drink? I guarantee every single person watching this is going to have highly contaminated water from your faucet full of pesticides, pharmaceuticals, environmental contaminants, and heavy metals.
And I know what you're thinking. Just filter the water, right? But even if you do that,
is your filter taking away the good stuff? I just learned that most water filters, when stripping out all the bad stuff, it also strips away all the good stuff.
You name it, you will find some reason that there is something wrong with it. Seriously, I challenge anyone who's watching this video to try and find any food or drink that doesn't have something bad about it. And sometimes, along with the nutrient profile, we also have to worry about man-made compounds that have leached into practically every single food source on the planet. There are studies where they tried to look at the impacts of microplastics on people by looking at people who had exposure versus not having any exposure. And guess what? They couldn't find a single person on the planet who didn't have trace amounts of microplastics in their system. This is also why I brought up fluoride earlier in the video. Sure, if you really wanted to, you could just not use fluoridated toothpaste, but you're still going to be getting some exposure to it no matter what you do. Unless the crops and livestock you eat were raised with filtered water and on soil that doesn't have fluoride in it, which is seriously unlikely, then there's going to be some trace amounts of fluoride in it. So yeah, pretty much no matter what you do, you'll always find something wrong with literally anything you can possibly consume. Now, does this mean that we're basically all screwed and doomed to be unhealthy no matter what? Well, if you really want to be that picky about it, then yeah, we're all cooked. However, that's not the way that I look at it. Even if it's true that it's literally impossible to fully avoid all the bad stuff in food or products, I don't define health as not consuming anything that's bad for you. If you do enough to avoid as much of the bad stuff as you reasonably can, while also getting in lots of good nutrients, you can absolutely still have a thriving, healthy body. I mentioned before how countries like Japan have a long life expectancy, despite them eating a lot of fish which contains heavy metals and other potentially harmful nutrients. So it's obvious that we can still live healthy, prosperous lives even if we cannot absolutely be perfect in everything we consume and use. So really, that's the idea that I wanted to preach in this video. Even if literally everything has something unhealthy about it, that doesn't mean that we're doomed to be an unhealthy person overall. Health and nutrition might seem like a black and white thing on the surface, but the more you look into it, the more you realize it's actually a really complex and nuanced topic with discussions that we don't always have a clear consensus on. But on the internet, there will always be some video, article, or study for basically anything that talks about how you need to fear it and never consume it. So my point is just don't stress about it. Just because something has a little bit of saturated fat, or anti-nutrients, or synthetic compounds, it doesn't mean that the food as a whole is bad for us. Especially if it has so many beneficial nutrients that we need to thrive, like omega-3 fats, protein, vitamin A, vitamin C, you name it. I mean, if we sit here just totally afraid to eat anything, then we'll face an even bigger problem of not getting in enough nutrients to sustain ourselves. Once you break down this fear of worrying about a few small downsides of certain foods, you open up the door to trying out a whole new array of interesting stuff, diverse in nutrients and benefits. Not to mention the potential for new recipes and dishes to make your meals more interesting. If there's anything I'd hope that someone could take away from this video, it's this. Don't be afraid to try new foods and expand your diet, even if you saw some video that said it was bad because of some minute detail. There's no harm in trying something out and seeing if it works well for you. See how you feel, check your blood work. If it's not working for you, then just stop it and try something else. It's about understanding your body and what it agrees with. So with that, I think I've crashed out enough and finally gotten this annoyance off my chest. I'd hope that in the future these health influencers can adopt a more nuanced and open approach to their messaging. But until then, I'll be continuing to try new foods and doing my own blood work to find out what lifestyle truly helps me thrive the best.